Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are in early 2034, and it has been perhaps the most eventful offseason in the history of this Buffalo Wings franchise, even though we've only signed one player. That one player is Shamar Jeanneret, the reigning American League most valuable player, coming off of a year when he hit .328 with 46 homers, 137 runs driven in. Great personality. The fans are very excited to have him on board. We signed him to a 7-year deal at an average of $40 million a year. With the amount of money we had to spend this upcoming season, though, he'll be making $50 million for this 2034 season in a contract that is slightly front-loaded. Certainly hoping that the 29-year-old is the missing piece to the puzzle to get this team over the hump. We had a 104-58 record in 2033, most wins in franchise history. Made the playoffs for a 6th consecutive season in our 8 years as GM/manager of the Buffalo Wings. But we've never won a World Series. Honestly, we've never even made it to a World Series. The furthest we've gone is 3 trips to the NLCS, and we have lost all of them. Last season, we were near the top in just about every offensive category. You can see we were second in the National League in runs scored and generally in the top 2, 3, or 4 in almost every category. But we were 14th in the league in home runs, and certainly expecting that the addition of Jeanneret to our lineup may help us address that issue. And think it's conceivable, coming off of a season when we had the best pitching staff in the National League, that next season we will have both the best pitching staff and the best offense in the league. Obviously, that would be lofty territory to get there, but I think we should be better offensively than we were a year ago, and we've just added one of the top offensive players in baseball. And on the pitching side, we're not really losing anybody significant, and Juan Estrada, who missed the last 4 months of last season with an injury, should be back as well and hopefully healthy. And as a two-way player, he's also someone who could give another boost to our offense. So expectations are high, not expecting to do anything too wild over the rest of this offseason. We don't have tons of money to do anything too wild as well. We'll continue looking for a ace starter. Always love to add somebody like that if at all possible, but the prices thus far in the trade market have, not surprisingly, proven to be quite prohibitive to us. We've got international amateur free agency coming up in a little over a week, and then after that we're just going to turn our attention to trying to round out our roster, and particularly some of our minor league rosters, before the season begins, and hopefully get this team healthily through the preseason and spring training. And we've simmed ahead about a week and a half, and we are at the start of the international amateur free agent period. Time to see what type of youthful talent we can bring on board this year. Quite honestly, although I've spent a fair amount of time on these players offline over the last several days in real time, not too much has changed in the players that we've been scouting since our initial foray into the IAFA crop in October. The 3 pitchers that we've been bringing into camp are David Irving, the only 5-star pitching prospect. If the changeup develops, he could definitely be a really good starter. If the changeup doesn't develop and the curve doesn't get better, though, he's probably an excellent reliever. So given that he's already 18 years old, he's looking for close to $2 million a year, I don't think that's a direction we're going to go. I always like to bring on pitching, but I'm not so enthralled with Irving, particularly given that I think when all is said and done, he's likely to go for close to the 4.75 million cap, if not more, if there's one of the teams with more money to spend. Gioacchino Sigala, another pitching prospect. Like the fact that he's got a potential 4 to 5 pitch arsenal if things work out. But best case scenario, he looks like a 3 or a 4 starter. Do like that he's a lefty, but he's also an older prospect, almost 19 years old, looking for $3 million. Don't think that is a route that we are going to pursue. So if we're going to go for a pitcher, we're probably going to go a little bit bargain oriented. And Anastasio Ibarra, 16 years old, so he's a couple years younger than the other players that we've just talked about, has a potential for, I guess, to speak accurately, he probably has a potential 3 to 6 pitch arsenal, depending on how everything develops. Does have enough stamina to potentially start. Similarly to the last prospect we looked at, best case scenario, he's probably a 3 or a 4. The things that he does have going for him, though, not looking for a ton of money, $140 million, and we built a very strong relationship with him, and league interest in him is only high rather than stratospheric at this point. So I think if we go for a catcher this year, or a pitcher this year, it's probably going to be on the bargain side of things, and Ibarra is probably the route that we will go if we go with a pitcher. But that is a somewhat big if in my mind, because as you can see here, there's 5 5-star potential everyday players, along with a couple other pretty interesting prospects as well. We'll start with the prospects that our scout is a bit less enthusiastic about. Dominic Leyland, out of Australia. Like the fact that he's durable, has some decent outfield range, and certainly looks like if he fully develops, he could have a pretty interesting bat, with the caveat that he's going to likely be striking out a lot. But certainly not a bad prospect, someone we've also built a very strong relationship with, and you can see he's looking for the least money out of any of these 7 players that we've scouted and brought into our camp most recently. Third baseman Jorge Vivanco, 18-year-old out of the Dominican. Respectable defensively with the great arm you'd love to have as a third baseman. Also looks like if he fully develops, he could be a more than respectable hitter. Similarly to Leyland, he'll strike out a lot. Not a ton of speed. I think if I were to go for one of these players, I would lean towards the younger Leyland, looking for half as much money. But then we'll get into the 5-star potential prospects. Andres Arellano, 16-year-old out of the Dominican, and one of the younger of these top prospects. Certainly looks like a potentially awesome bat with potential 70 home run power and 80 discipline. Not a perfect defender at third base. Probably not going to want to play him in the outfield either. So he's a first base / third base / DH, most likely. Certainly an interesting bat, though, and also not looking for crazy money. Would love to see a scenario where we could potentially get somebody like Leyland, Arellano, and the young pitcher Ibarra. But the chances of that happening, I think, are relatively low. Ramiro Elenes, an 18-year-old out of Venezuela, going to be turning 19 very shortly, so an older prospect. More of a true first baseman. Could hold your nose and play him in left field, but that looks like it could be very difficult defensively. So a first baseman / DH, potentially great contact and well above average home run power. Not a ton of speed, nowhere to play defensively. We've got a lot of players like this that we've seen in IAFA over the past several seasons. Probably not the first guy that we'd go after, even though we do have a very strong relationship with him. Ramiro Logo, a 17-year-old out of the Dominican, left fielder, another guy with a pretty decent bat, not a ton of speed. Looks like a pretty generic corner outfielder, but if the bat fully develops, he's an interesting player. But he's looking for more money than any of these guys, and league interest in him is very high. Probably not a route that we will go. Edgar Pietri, a 16-year-old third baseman out of the Dominican, has a very well-balanced batting profile. If he fully develops, he's not going to have any huge weaknesses. He should be average or better everywhere with borderline exceptional home run power if he fully develops. Not a ton of speed. Does have ratings that you could certainly play him at third base with. Not going to be a gold glove third baseman. Doesn't quite have the arm that I'd love to see, but certainly looks like he can play that position competently at the major league level. So I like him a lot. And then the last prospect that I'm going to look at, another 16-year-old, Ishmael Velasco, is another guy that I really like a lot. Like his durability, love the personality. He's got a little more speed than a lot of these other guys that we've talked about on the base paths. The 65 outfield range certainly can play potentially a very good left field. Could play him in center field or right as well. Would love a bit higher range and a higher error rating in right or in center, and certainly would prefer a bit stronger arm at both of those positions. And his bat also looks potentially interesting. The off-the-charts contact, who's not going to strike out much if he fully develops. He does have that high work ethic to hopefully spur him on over the years to achieve his full potential. He's a switch hitter and has potentially above average home run power. Great contact, above average home run power to go with average-ish gap power, average-ish eye, and a guy who's pretty tough to strike out, while the ability to play center field is not a horrible option as far as I'm concerned. So I think Leyland, Arellano, Pietri, and Velasco are the most interesting to me, because Velasco is looking for the most money, has the best personality, is durable, and is one of the few guys who at least brings competence in terms of his potential defense, bunting and base paths, and hitting ratings. I think I'm going to try to at least start a conversation with him. Offer him $2.5 million to start. Would love to just get him signed right away. I don't think it will actually happen, but I always hold out hope that going a little bit higher on these guys who are likely to max out or get close to maxing out, every once in a while one of them will slip through the cracks, sign with us early, and give us the potential to maybe have the money to pivot to add an Arellano, a Pietri, or a Leyland alongside him. With the offer to Velasco, I am also going to go after Ibarra. Going to offer him a little more than he is looking for as well. I acknowledge that potentially bringing him on board could cut me out from being able to sign any of those other offensive players that I'm talking about if they end up going for the full $4.75 million. We're going to offer him $200,000 right now, though. Well above what he's looking for, and hope that maybe we can get him signed really early in this process. In which case, if we got him signed as a potential pitcher, or not as a potential pitcher, as a pitcher in our organization, for 200,000. That would still leave us with 4.55 million to either try to sign Velasco, or if that didn't work out, pivot to Arellano, Pietri, and Leyland, and in a perfect world, some combination of 2 out of 4 of those position players. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's the first day of the international free agent signing period. If I don't have hope that I can do something interesting now, I'm never going to have that hope. And we've now heard back from Anastasio Ibarra, and he is looking for more money. Says he's got a better offer from Cleveland. Only looking for a little bump from where we were, though. And actually, he said Cleveland, but now he's saying Dodgers. So I'm starting to think that Anastasio is just a filthy liar trying to trick us to get more money. But we will bump it up to 250 grand. And it looks like he's at least willing to think about that at this point. Velasco still says he favors our offer. We haven't heard from him since he initially said that, though. My hunch is he's probably getting some impressive bids from some other teams, unfortunately. And we've got bad news and good news. The bad news is Ibarra has come back, and he says he is looking for even more money, $440,000 at this point. But the really good news is that Velasco signed the contract. He was kind of the guy we like the most. Clearly, there's a chance you could argue that offering him the 2.5 when he was only saying he wanted 2.4, maybe we could have gotten him a little cheaper. But my theory is if he's our top guy in the class and we can potentially get him at an amount that lets us chase after some other players, I'd rather get him locked up early rather than potentially get in bidding wars for a lesser player down the line. So really happy to have Velasco on board. We can make another offer to Ibarra, obviously. But in the meantime, I want to check in on what a couple of those other prospects that I was interested in were looking for. And it looks like Pietri and Arellano are still around. I'm guessing with the fact that we've only got 2.25 million left to spend that Pietri may be a bit of a stretch for us at this point. He said he would do the 1.8 still, though, so that is interesting to know. I do like him as a third base prospect. I don't hate Arellano either, though. Pietri is certainly better defensively. Arellano, with that potential 70 home run power and 80 discipline, probably have to favor him with the bat. Ooh, it looks like Arellano actually has a deal bigger than what we can offer him, so that makes it a little easier for us. I am going to offer Pietri the 1.8 million that he is looking for. And then we will see Anastasio Ibarra. We've got 450,000 to offer. So the perfect scenario for us is that both of those players accept these offers for exactly what we've offered them, because we can't offer a penny more to both of them. Presumably one or both of them is going to come back and let us know that they're looking for more money. And certainly in the case of the third baseman, it's possible that he eventually comes back to us and says that he's looking for more money than we can possibly offer him. But we'll try to thread the needle here as close as possible. We've offered every penny we can offer at this point. If we could somehow bring in these three players as our international amateur free agent class, I'd view that as a big win. I think it's doubtful that it will happen, but we're giving it a shot. And not surprisingly, Pietri looking for more money. He's got an offer more than our remaining bonus pool, looks like from Atlanta. So we will pivot on from him at this point. We still have not heard back yet on our latest offer. I guess we have heard from Ibarra that he favors it. I still think Ibarra would not be a horrible option to bring on as a somewhat more economical pitching prospect. It is interesting. His initial demand was $140,000, and he supposedly has low greed, but he's already gotten us up to giving him $450,000. But we're going to continue to focus on trying to bring Mr. Ibarra on board as a pitcher to join Velasco. And we're going to start thinking about some of these second-tier prospects, and maybe if there's a way we can get involved with one of them. And among the next tier of players, David Sandoval, a 16-year-old third baseman out of Mexico, is the guy that we are going to try to make an offer to. Almost a perfect personality. He could be competent-ish defensively at third, certainly could play first at 6'4", and he could play left or right field also. So a little bit of positional versatility. The bat certainly doesn't look exciting, but if he fully developed and he was basically average just about everywhere with plus home run power and a plus eye, that's still not a horrible combination. And he's not looking for crazy-ish money yet. $1.5 million is what he's looking for, which gives us potentially another $300,000 to use on him and or Ibarra, depending on how the negotiations go. So we are going to meet his demand and submit a $1.5 million offer to Mr. Sandoval. And Sandoval says he likes our offer. Ibarra, despite his alleged lack of greed, is back looking for even more money. He's not going up in huge steps, but he is just slowly getting more and more. Says he wants $480. We'll offer him $500 and try to get Anastasio on board. And Sandoval, the third baseman, is now looking back for more money as well. $2.8 million. Now we cannot outbid the Cubs, so we are going to move on from you, Mr. Sandoval. We still got discussions going with Ibarra, and maybe we drop down now and try to find someone who is a little less highly regarded. One other thing that I'm probably going to do now is also revisit some of those top-of-the-line pitchers that I have tried to trade for from time to time in the past and been unable to get any traction on. But if throwing in $1 million, $1.5 million of international amateur free agent money is very attractive to a team, that's another option for me to use some of that money for at this point, if it allows us to pick up the next Pedro Martinez or Tom Seaver or Whitey Ford or Walter Johnson or Bob Gibson, or you get the point. And we've got some good news. After a long and drawn-out negotiation process, we did finally land Anastasio Ibarra. Ended up paying him more than we were hoping at $500,000. But for the guy who we think was the third best pitching prospect among starting pitchers, not a horrible amount. Again, best case scenario, he's a good, solid, respectable number 4, and there's certainly no guarantees that he fulfills the best case scenario. More than likely, we're not going to see the best case scenario, which might mean he ends up as a fifth starter or a bullpen guy, or he never makes it above rookie ball for all we know. But for $500,000, not a horrible guy to bring on board. A couple other guys that we're still negotiating with, looking for somewhat less money, although they both say they want more now. Another pitching prospect, Juan Esteves, purely a reliever, but he's 16 years old, throwing in the mid-90s. Durable injury proneness. He does have ground ball tendencies, which helps a little bit with the fact that his movement seems like it's going to be average as best. Fastball and a splitter that both could be pretty nasty, so his stuff could be interesting. We'll probably re-engage with him. Center fielder David Molina, another guy not looking for tons of money, has a good personality. Drink if you've been waiting for me to say good personality. And looks like his bat could be slightly above average-ish. Not the most exciting prospect in the world, but for not big money, wouldn't mind making this class a little bit bigger. Get a few more lottery tickets into our international complex. We have tried trading for some of the big pitchers with the international amateur free agent money, and not shockingly, the requests for those players are still very high. And Vance Honeycutt, whose bat we replaced with Generette, has finally signed somewhere. The fans are shocked. We did not keep him around, and fan interest almost crashed. But our fan interest is still at 100 or higher, so I am not that concerned. But let's see what Honeycutt got. $16.4 million, so not quite what he was looking for. Although he did, the numbers are going to increase. He got almost $20 million a year for 7 years from the Braves. Good luck to him. He's almost 31. He's fragile, and he's coming off the 2 worst seasons in his career. He'll probably come back to haunt us in the race for the division or potentially the playoffs against the Braves, but certainly would view at this point here on February 7th the move from Honeycutt to Generette for the middle of our lineup as a significant upgrade. And we are still in negotiations with the relief pitching prospect Juan Esteves. The other players that we've talked about have been looking for bigger and bigger money, so talks have broke down with them. Honestly, $750,000 for Esteves is not insignificant. But we've got the money to spend, so we're going to meet that demand, submit that offer. Would not mind if we got him signed to round out our class potentially with the starting pitching prospect and the center fielder prospect that we've already signed. Velasco and Ibarra. I think I remember their names. And we did end up getting Juan Esteves signed, the 6'8 reliever, for that $750,000. So that now gives us 3 pretty decent prospects that we've picked up in international amateur free agency this year. I'd say both of the pitching prospects, Ibarra and Esteves, are borderline, but we didn't spend a ton of money on either of them, and certainly have big expectations for the young center fielder Velasco. And we've made it to the start of spring training. Going to be going with our usual 6-man rotation. Sincere Shazier and Chris Sabatka, our 1-2 punch. Also going to take a look and see what Harleen Susana, Andrew Painter, Juan Estrada, and Isidro Ochoa can do. Plenty of other guys who could start for us on this team. Jorge Carrillo, Hayden Yinger, and even Sean Sullivan are all guys who have started for us in the past. Feel like we've got a ton of pitching talent on this team. Perhaps the one thing we are missing is a true ace, although the 24-year-old Sincere Shazier still has a little bit of growth that could happen as far as his control, his fastball, and his sinker. He was 10-3 with a 2.38 ERA as a rookie for us last year. Obviously, if he keeps putting up those type of numbers with the fact that he throws in the high 90s and he's also durable as far as his injury proneness, he could perhaps develop into the ace that we are looking for, even though for most aces we'd expect their stuff to be a little nastier. That said, his overall profile is still pretty solid for the former fourth-round draft pick. And we've got a ton of position players in camp. You may remember at the start of the offseason, adding a utility infielder was the one thing that we wanted to try to do in addition to adding a big bat. We've obviously added the biggest bat out there in Generette. And we do have some guys in camp this year that we've signed to minor league deals and or had in the system, notably as Waldo Cabrera, Tommy Edman, Christian Knapczyk, Brooks Lee, who could be competing for that utility infielder spot. We've got Kyron Paris back. We've had him in the past on the major league team. We've got the youngster Steve Anderson in camp, and then Miguel Vargas as well, who we had envisioned as absolutely being one of our utility infielders this year, but with the amount of talent that we have in camp, I don't think there's any guarantees that Vargas is going to make the team. Not a big issue if we have to cut him, since his previous team retained 95% of his salary, so not a big negative financial situation. And there are still some potentially interesting shortstops available as free agent. Armando Cruz, I know, has been noted by viewers as someone to potentially consider. The glove there is very intriguing to me. The bat less so. Chris Dillard, another guy, pretty solid glove. A little bit more interesting bat to me, at least, since he's a better contact hitter. Do like the durability. Even a couple other guys with John Kasevich out there, Nick Allen. There are guys who could play a competent-ish shortstop for us if we need. Not going to chase after any of them at this point on the free agent market. With the all the guys we have in camp, you can see our total money available has shrunk considerably. But if any of those guys is willing to accept a really cut rate offer 2 or 3 weeks from now, or perhaps even accept a minor league offer, we'll certainly bring them in for the last week or two of camp and see if perhaps one of them can make our 26-man roster as well. And it does seem like a lot of those players we mentioned have gotten picked up, so we may have a little less optionality for utility infielder than we had hoped, but I think we're still fine with the team that we have. One interesting guy I wanted to point out, our former Silver Slugger winner and All-Star, Samuel Basallo, still a free agent. After we let him go last season, he combined to spend 2,033 in high A ball and double A ball, where he combined for 51 home runs and 100 runs driven in, while still striking out 173 times in just 363 at-bats. So it looks like some of his best traits, the home run power, and some of his worst traits, the free-swinging strikeout tendencies, were exacerbated in his minor league season last year. Basallo looks like he might accept a minor league contract, though. I don't know if he'd do it with us, but I'll certainly throw out a minor league deal to our old friend and see if maybe we can have him in as an insurance policy in AAA this year. And as we near the end of spring training here on March 26th, the one thing that we can't have happen just happened. Ace pitcher Chris Sabatka going to be out for 3 months with shoulder inflammation. He is a guy who has tied for the National League lead in wins each of the 2 years he's been with our Buffalo team, was the runner-up for the Cy Young Award last year, and with that injury, his ratings have definitely taken a step back. Makes it all the more important for us to hopefully have Sincere Shazier really develop into a true number one. Because looking at this ratings profile, I wonder if Sabatka comes back and this is really what he looks like, whether he is going to actually be back in our rotation. It's unfortunate, but it seems like this is a relatively serious injury. And looking at his scouting report, he's not what we thought he was. You can see in recent months since the end of last season, his movement has dropped. His control has dropped. Hasn't lost any velocity yet, but definitely not looking as strong a profile as he previously had. So Sabatka's going to go on the IL. We have plenty of starters, but once again, as we've been talking about for seasons now, would love to have a monster true ace on this team. I'll do some more searching in the trade market. I don't think there's a deal out there that we'd be willing to do, but it's worth another look at this point, although now we are potentially trading from a bit of a point of weakness, knowing that Sabatka's going to be out for 3 months. And we've made it to the start of the regular season. Obviously, the loss of our presumptive number one starter, Chris Sabatka, for a few months to that injury. That looks like it may impact his ability to be a top-notch starter for us is a big concern. That said, I think we still should have a pretty good starting rotation this year, but it does increase the impetus for us to try to find an affordable top starter to try to pick up in a trade. Looking at our rotation with the injury to Sabatka, we are going to go with Sincere Shazier, Harleen Susanna, Andrew Painter, Juan Estrada, and the rookie Isidro Ochoa as our rotation to start. And these numbers are not as good as they look because I've been working on my minor league team, and they are relative to the international league rather than major leagues. We've got that fixed now. Bryce Miller going to be back as our closer. Lorne Walborn, who we picked up in that trade, a big-time lefty arm for our bullpen. Hopefully he will be the closer if Miller falters. Former starters Hayden Yinger and Johanne Varejo are going to be setup man for us. Yinger, the only former starter. Varejo has been in our pen since he came up for good last year. The lefty Matthew Wenzel and the righty Franklin Heel are going to be our middle relievers. And then our long relievers are going to be the lefty Sean Sullivan and the righty Jorge Carrillo. Carrillo, Sullivan, and Yinger all have started for us in the past, and all could be in the mix to take over as starters if we have any further injuries or ineffectiveness from, quite honestly, any of these players. The only one who I feel pretty confident is going to be in the rotation all year if he is healthy, regardless of performance, is probably the budding potential ace, Sincere Shazier. Other than that, anyone's spot could eventually be in jeopardy. Yinger has done a really nice job for us as a starter over many years now. Sullivan was a starter for us for a long time. Has been used primarily out of the pen the last couple seasons. And then Carrillo got a brief shot as a starter a couple years ago. Probably Yinger would be our first guy we would go to. Carrillo probably the second guy we would go to if we do look to make any changes with this rotation in the coming months. And we've also obviously cut down to the 13 position players that we're going to be bringing north to Buffalo with us, plus one with Juan Estrada, the two-way threat. And ended up having some real interesting decisions to make to get to this 26-man roster. We did keep the Rule 5 acquisition, Alejandro Mercado. We've gotten newer scouting reports on him, and he's not too far off being a major league hitter, even though he's never played above rookie ball. I don't think he's going to get a lot of playing time this year, but he's only 22 years old. If we can survive with him as our 26th man off the bench, I do think that 65 infield range and the fact that it looks like he could be a competent major league hitter has some value as a potential utility man for us going forward, particularly if once we own his rights, we can have him down in the minors in a season or two. So I don't think he's going to get a ton of playing time for us, but still think he could be an interesting bat eventually coming off of our bench as a utility infielder who can hopefully play just about anywhere in the infield once he's been properly trained. But besides him, Rutschman back as our catcher, Medina back as our backup catcher. We're actually going to play Rutschman against right-handed batters and Medina against left-handed batters. Infield, Joe Edwards, Deshaun Seifu, Tim Hull, and Cam Collier as we go around the horn. And we've got a lot of outfielders who made the 26-man roster this year. Bobby Bolig is back. He can also play first base. Shamar Jenneret is going to be our designated hitter. Nate Kimmel, youngster, is a first baseman / corner outfielder. We had him in Albany just for the first few games that have been played before the major league season starts. But after hitting .307 last year in Albany with 22 doubles, 10 triples, and 18 home runs, he just does not have a lot left to prove at that level. Tyreek Hardage is going to get the first crack at being our starting center fielder this year. Gavin Grahovac, going to be a pinch hitter often and get some playing time against left-handed pitching. And then Mike Heiner, last year's Rookie of the Year, is back with Heiner, Grahovac, Kimmel, Bolig, and actually Jenneret. We've got a lot of guys who can also play first base. In the case of Grahovac, can also play catcher and some other infield positions if need be. So a little bit of versatility there. Part of the reason I went with so many batters in the outfield is that I just think Kimmel is going to be an important bat for us against left-handed pitching. And we had such a potentially exceptional lineup that Joe Edwards is actually not starting against right-handed pitching for us. So he is actually going to be kind of a super utility guy for us against right-handed pitching. If we need a backup at second or third or first, or even probably the corner outfield spots, he's going to be the first guy that we give that opportunity to. Don't know how many at-bats we're going to be able to get him. I'd certainly love to be able to get him to close to 400 at-bats this year. He doesn't really have a ton of development that still needs to take place. I think he can get a little better with his contact and his home run power. But both Kimmel and Edwards are going to have pretty important roles against left-handed pitching for us. Kimmel, Edwards, and Grahovac, and Medina are all going to be playing for us against left-handed pitching, taking over for Medina. As we mentioned, Rutschman, Edwards will play third base over the left-handed hitting Cam Collier. Grahovac is going to play first base, but really kind of take Juan Estrada's spot in the lineup. And then Kimmel's going to play left field and take Bobby Bolig's spot in the lineup. So we do have a lot of platoon situations this year. I don't think it's perfect that some of the younger players like Edwards and Kimmel are only going to be getting regular starting time against left-handed pitching. But it is what it is at this point. We are a team that is built to win right now. And with the possible exception of having Alejandro Mercado on the roster, I feel like the rest of the team are the players that give us the best opportunity to win right now. We do have some useful middle infielders down in AAA who we had signed to minor league contracts. So if Mercado ends up being a disaster, or we have some injuries and we need a more established and competent defensive infielder, we do have some options to potentially bring up there if it turns out that we are a little too heavy on the outfielders and first basemen with this 26-man roster that we're going north with. And certainly when we think about it, Deshaun Seifu is our durable second baseman. He goes out, pretty much plays over 150 games every year. So we're not going to need a backup for him all that often. And honestly, although Joe Edwards isn't great defensively, very comfortable with him playing second base for us, 15 times over the course of the year. The bigger hole is going to be at shortstop if we have injuries to Tim Hull, which we're hoping we don't. He's been another guy who's consistently been out there for 150 plus games the last few years since we brought him up. But right now, Mercado, by virtue of his better range, would be our backup shortstop if and when we need somebody. I just don't think that playing Edwards there is incredibly wise. And if Mercado does not end up hitting very much, or if we do get unlucky and we have an injury to Hull, there are better shortstop options in AAA for this team. And with the 26-man roster settled and our hope that Sobotka will be back around the All-Star break, time to take a look at what the projections are for this team this coming year. You can see Toronto and the A's expected to win the AL East and the AL West pretty easily. And our Buffalo Wings are expected to have a pretty easy time with the National League East. The Rockies, who took us out in the playoffs last year, are projected to win the National League West. But with a projected 98 wins, we are expected to be the best team in baseball for a second consecutive year. Jenneret expected to have a monster year for us, 307, 47 homers, and 137 ribbies in that simulation. And it doesn't look like we're expected to have any of the top pitchers at this point, but that can certainly change. So the expectations are high here in Buffalo, hoping to finally get this team to the World Series. I think that the potential for this to be the 1 year with both Jenneret and Rutschman in the lineup, it's the year for us to try to win a title. Certainly the loss of Sobotka to the injury and the regression in his pitching ratings and the regression in his arsenal also is absolutely a concern for us. Hopefully there will be an option to perhaps add a big-time pitcher to our pitching staff some point over the course of this season. And when I say a big-time pitcher, I need a big-time starter. I think we have plenty of good quality major league starters, but the top of our rotation, particularly with Sobotka injured and or not what he used to be, definitely concerns me for a short series in the playoffs. That's part of the reason why we're giving Ochoa the chance in the rotation to start the year with the injuries. I don't think he's going to become a top of the rotation type pitcher for us, but he's 24 years old at this point. He's the number 92 prospect in baseball. He's pitched game 162 for us for 2 consecutive seasons. With the injury to Sobotka, it's time to hopefully accelerate Ochoa's development as much as possible and hopefully find out exactly what he is for us. And we will find out how opening day goes in our next episode. Until then, Thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.